Sanford Dole and a bunch of other white planters wanted Hawaii to be an American territory. And the reason they wanted this was because America had a bunch of tariffs on Hawaiian fruit. And what's that do to prices on Hawaiian fruit? Raises them, which makes his fruit less desirable to the American public, which is a huge market. So he wanted to have America annex Hawaii, make it a territory, therefore there'd be no tariffs. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it was actually a monarchy. Queen Lululekalani was the monarchy in Hawaii.
So, never mind, I forgot it. Go on.
Alright. The Queen Lululekalani did not desire annexation. But the president at this time, which was Benjamin Harrison, was an imperialist, beginnings of imperialism, and was interested in getting Hawaii. So he sent some troops in, and Sanford Dole was able to gather enough American troops and overthrew the Queen and wanted to become an American territory. But right when that happened, Benjamin Harrison lost the election and Grover Cleveland became president. Grover Cleveland was an anti-imperialist, refused to annex Hawaii, and Hawaii became its own country with President Sanford Dole at the helm. And this is a perfect example of American white intervention for business reasons. The indigenous Hawaiians had no say in this and weren't particularly interested in becoming American. As a majority, anyway. But a very small part of powerful white plantation owners had enough power and influence to get enough troops and overthrew the sitting queen and the monarch, and now Hawaii's sitting there. Later, Americans are going to want Hawaii because it is really important in terms of a fueling station for trade with Asia. It's especially going to be important because in the Spanish-American War, America is going to get the Philippines, which is really big in this example. And they can go to Hawaii, Philippines, or next door to China, and America now has more markets. One thing I want to talk about is the idea of something called spheres of influence. What's a sphere of influence? Yeah, I mean, if you have if you don't have any military bases outside of your country, then your sphere of influence is regional, right? Have you ever heard countries be called regional powers? Like Iran is a regional power. They don't have bases all over the world, so their influence is regional. As you put more bases and you own countries all over the world in terms of colonial power, then your sphere of influence grows. And you can have say in lots of stuff that goes on really far away from your country. America's sphere of influence is global. And therefore, America has its hand in almost every single thing that's going on. One real spot that is not the case is Africa. America does not have a very huge influence in Africa. And because of this, has been very weak. And when there are horrible African dictators who do horrible things to their people, America is not interested. Because we don't have bases over there. We have a million bases in Europe. We have them all over Asia. We have them in the Middle East. We have them in Latin America. We have them obviously all over. We have them in Hawaii and Alaska, Japan, Korea. But we don't have them really in Africa, at least a bit to speak of. There is a base we have, a small base in Somalia, but it's not like a forward base. Someone said, why what?
Well, we don't have bases in Africa, but technically have only fought there once, so there really was no point in having it.
Well, it's not that there's no point, is that no one asked us. Like usually we get bases once we leave a war, right? We leave people, right? We don't have a base in Vietnam. Why?
Because we left.
Because we didn't win that one, right? We have a base in Korea, we have a base in Japan, we have a base in Germany, we have a base in England from when they were there before. We have a base in, 2 bases in the Middle East, we have one in Afghanistan, right? We have a base in Cuba still from the Spanish-American War. We literally have a base in an enemy's country.
So, do they want us there? Like,
Does who want us where?
the country that we're in, do they want us to have a base there?
Cuba doesn't.
Many countries don't.
Then why are we
The one in
because
Germany,
it's our sphere of influence. The American base in Japan is very, very unpopular in Japan now. A couple this is obviously not what usually happens, but a couple American soldiers have got in trouble for raping some girls while they're on leave in Japan. And Americans, that we don't allow those people to be prosecuted under Japanese law. And so it's like get prosecuted by American courts rather than Japanese courts, but they're doing this in Japan. Obviously, that's a very, 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 very teeny fraction. But Japan doesn't see us as being necessary there anymore, and that we're sort of buddying their affairs. Korea kind of goes back and forth. As North Korea gets stronger, South Koreans don't mind us so much being there. And when North Korea isn't so powerful, then there becomes more of a call for us to get out of South Korea. We ain't leaving either place. But to be honest, does everyone want us there? Not necessarily. I know Cuba doesn't want us there, but we definitely ain't leaving Cuba, which is also odd because, strategically speaking, I'm not sure how important it is for us to have a base in Cuba, which is 90 miles away from Florida anyway. But we have a base there, and we ain't about to leave.
Do you know how many military bases are just in one small strip of land in Florida? Like we were driving, and we drove past like 4 in an hour.
Yeah, Florida has a pretty good representation of all the branches down there too. Obviously, the Navy's strong, but
it's like a huge special
like,
forces.
if we were to leave Cuba, like what would happen? Would they just be like, "Yay, America's gone," or would they go about it?
They would be.
I don't know. I don't know enough about the daily life of Cuba to know. But it's a pretty. I mean, Guantanamo Bay is a very big base, but it's not doesn't occupy 10% of Cuba or anything like that. The Ramstein Bank, yeah, it's really big. Germany's base is huge.
Isn't that one a UN base? I heard that the one in Germany was just like a UN Air Force base.
I mean, it's so big it's used by lots of people. You're right about that, but it was originally an American base. All right, we got to keep going. All right, so we talked about Hawaii. Let's talk about Cuba a little bit,
yes.
And then tomorrow, hopefully, I'll have some of those images to show you guys and to find that. Cuba was. Let me draw you some more. Okay, here's Florida. Here's Cuba.
Whoa! Why's Florida up there?
Florida's right here. Cuba's right here.
Yeah, America's right there.
You don't have to talk every time. All right. So. The problem with Cuba, though, is who was Cuba controlled by colonially? Spain. And Spain was pretty brutal. In fact, they had been having, there was a Generalissimo Weyler was in control of in control of the colony, and began, because there was some push for Cuban independence, began a reconcentration effort. And there were concentration camps, not that dissimilar to what we saw in Nazi Germany. I mean, it wasn't some anti-Semitic like that, obviously, but people were dying. Over 100,000 people have estimated to die in these three concentration camps. Weyler was called a butcher. There was international pressure to get rid of him. And a lot of American journalists saw this as an opportunity to highlight this to push for war. This was a bad guy, and the way that Hearst, William Randolph Hearst, who was the biggest newspaper owner in the country, saw this as a way for us to connect with our Cuban brothers. We had kicked off the yoke of the British, the European powers, and we will help the Cubans do the same thing with the Spanish. And so he actually sent a photographer, a guy named Frederick Remington, into Cuba and said, "I want you to take pictures of all the things going on." Well, when he sent Remington in, Weyler had already been sent back to Spain, and things had cooled down a little bit, and Remington sent back a letter to Hearst and said, "There's no pictures here." And Hearst famously cabled back, allegedly, and said, "You furnish the pictures, I'll furnish the war." And what Remington did was stage a bunch of pictures of Cuban women being kind of mishandled by Spanish men, and they put it in the press a lot in America, and Americans started getting ginned up for war. This happens a lot more now than you even think it does. Now, you don't remember this because you were, I don't know how old you were when 9/11 happened, but after 9/11 happened, there were all these pictures of Arabic people burning the flag and jumping up because everybody was so happy because 9/11. I had a friend of mine who lived in the Middle East. That actually was wrong. A lot of American news companies, including CNN and everybody, those were images from 6 months before that. And they were playing it after 9/11, saying that this is what people were doing in response to the Twin Towers being taken down. And my friend who lived in the Middle East, she was like, this is not the case. She said, everyone's coming up to me apologizing and saying this was not when this happened. This was months and months and months ago. But even today, the American press wants to gin up the Americans to get us moving in one direction over the other. If you don't think so, you're wrong. War is still really good for networks. It's a lot of money. And we're going to be pushing for war partly because of scale of journalism. And then obviously tomorrow we'll get into it and we'll finish it up on Monday.